Are you actually talking?
Okay, now we're getting feedback.
Turn your volume down.
I mute myself. Are you? Can people hear me through you?
Mhm.
No? Okay.
We can set this up here.
Now I'm in two places. Okay. Good evening. Sorry for our technical problems this evening. Um, anyway, my name is Amy Allen. I've been a teacher for 10 years, and I want to speak to you tonight about the third year of kindergarten, Montessori, and why that third year is so important. Um, the third year of kindergarten is truly a special year. Montessori itself, the Montessori primary program, is a holistic curriculum that meets a wide range of development needs from 2.5 to 6 years old. So by the time a Montessori child is 5 years, they have spent a lot of time doing practical life lessons. They've spent time in Montessori sensorial area, developing independence and refining those fine motor skills and developing a level of focus. They've learned how to sequence at 5. They've pretty much in general learned how to sequence and follow multiple steps and listen to direction. The typical 5-year-old can focus, select their own work, and complete a full work cycle. In the 5-year-old year becomes so important because they're ready to move on to more expanded lessons. In general, because of their time in the other areas of the class and because of their age, their bodies have settled down and their fine motor skills are ready to go. They're ready for the 5-year-old lessons. Typically, these are more advanced math lessons that involve multiple steps and multiple concentration. They're also at 5 much more socially aware, and they're aware of the world we live in. Kindergarten in a Montessori class is the kind of they're excited. They have a new level of awakening, and they sort of have the world is their oyster, really, in the Montessori classroom because they're free to choose lessons on their own. They're free to explore on their own. And like I said, this 5-year-old has a greater level of concentration, so the Montessori works become more appropriate to that level. Some of the more advanced lessons that you may see a 5-year-old doing is 4-digit numbers, adding 4-digit numbers, division. We even start exploring grammar, capitalization, writing, and even creative writing. But we'll get more into the specifics of that in later parent ed nights. We're going to go into the specific of lessons. Sorry, a little distracted here. The kindergarten year becomes a rite of passage for the child. They become the leaders and the mentors of the classroom. They are looked up to by their younger peers. That third year, kindergartners gain confidence. in helping other children learn how to zip their jacket, how to do the pink tower, how to even learn their letter sounds. Okay, sorry. I guess people were tired of seeing me double. I guess that was a little too distracting. A little too much of me. Okay, so what I was trying to say is that the older kindergarten child gets to be the leader in the classroom. Um, they start teaching basic lessons, even basic counting lessons. If I or their teacher feels comfortable, we let them do that, and they take this job very seriously and are actually more effective teachers. Sometimes the children tend to less listen to their peer, even to a higher level than they'll listen to a teacher. Um, the Montessori kindergarten is the core and the heart of the classroom, honestly. Um, and those younger children that have been there want to be those kindergartners. And it's amazing to me how they'll remember the children in previous years. There's names. They'll still talk about them. Like, I want to be, when I'm like Ishan, I'm going to, that when they're 4-year-olds, you hear them throwing out these names and they remember the kids that were there. They want to assume those roles in the classroom. Um, I also want to urge you, the kindergarten year, I want to urge you to not discount that social emotional piece. I can see a lot of parents think, oh, that's nice. They're helpers, they're friends. But don't discount that social emotional intelligence and skills like kindness. In a recent study, and this was published a few years ago in the American Journal of Public Health, um, it was all about it studied these 5-year-olds for 20 years, and they took notes from their kindergarten teachers actually, and it was very interesting to find out the children who basically played nice, the children that could get along with others, actually ended up in this study being the ones that had higher levels of education. They had higher paying jobs. It wasn't necessarily those early readers, it was the ones who exhibited social and emotional intelligence. So I really urge you not to discount that. Um, studies, more studies show that it's social emotional intelligence lead to a pathway of success, and they are just as important as language and math. And what you also need to understand is just because a child is an early reader, it doesn't mean that, so they're reading at 4 or they're reading at 3. It doesn't mean that trajectory of learning continues like all the way through high school. It can, but usually everybody sort of levels out about 3rd grade. You'll find that children that are reading early are not necessarily way above children that read a little bit later. It's just early childhood development tends to be very uneven. People learn at different rates. Children walk at different times. It's the same thing in gaining competence in language and math. Um, but I also wanted to share with you that 3rd year becomes much more collaborative. And here's an example from my own classroom. And I wasn't expecting this project that we started um, took on a life of its own. Wow, I just put sorry about that. I didn't realize that just erased my face there for a second. Sorry. So we started studying Africa in our classroom, and this was a month-long study of animals. And so I started out with the basic animals. We were studying Africa, and animals is a good way to introduce different countries of the world. So I started out with the regular animals like giraffe, elephant, and they more and more wanted to find out about different animals in Africa. And they even went through this book and started picking out really obscure, like there's the opaki, which is some sort of antelope deer. They wanted to know about this wild dog. They started asking me questions. So I had to do a lot of research. I had to do a lot of catch up, which was fun. And I learned a lot. They also went home and started talking to their parents. And one of the parents grew up in Kenya. Didn't know that. He came in with pictures and we all shared this experience together. The children spent time together flipping through books and asking me questions. They also went home and started researching animal facts. I had a 4-year-old that told me that the hippo's ears spin around to get water out of them. And I'm like, okay, that's specific, that's odd, but that's specific enough that I believe there's got to be some truth on it in it. And I did find, if you can Google this and you can see how the hippo's ears spin around. So he wasn't just making things up. But within this, we started learning about different animal habitats in Africa. We learned about the mountain gorilla lives in the areas of Rwanda, high in the mountains, but then other animals live on the safari, the savannah, excuse me. Um, and then it also came to a time where I had to address that these animals are endangered and their habitats are endangered. And I didn't go heavily into the poaching aspect. One child brought it up, but this made the children incredibly sad. And in that moment, I thought, well, we could, because they were they wanted to do something. They were like, what can we do? What, why? And I'm like, well, maybe we can start a penny drive. So we started collecting pennies. The children got really went into this. They made pictures. This all kind of happened very spontaneously. They made pictures. We advertised our penny drive. We graphed how much money we made. They rolled the pennies. Um, the parents got involved, obviously donating their change. Um, and it really became an amazing project. And it was one that it was chiefly led by the kindergartners. Um, so that was something I just wanted to share from my own experience, how collaborative and how different that it can be more child led. Um, uh, so what happens when these children, when Montessori children get to first grade? That's often a question that we are asked as teachers. I believe, and I've heard this back from other parents that have a second child in the school or I run into, you will find that those children are not only prepared for first grade, they generally tend to be more mature, they are more confident, and have a more defined sense of self. These children, sorry, these children are better equipped to deal with a new school environment, whether that be public or whether that will be private. Okay, and so I'd like to go into the differences between what we offer in a Montessori situation at our school and the difference between public. Our classes are small. We give your child individualized attention. In public school, they have 20 to 30 kindergartners. It can take months to get to know a child, especially if they're shy in a new environment. They have new routines. It can take a long time for a child to open up to a new teacher. Here, we already know your kid, especially if they've been here. We've got some children that have been here since the toddler room. We really know these children. They're supported here. They feel secure about their environment. And this allows that when they have this culmination of awakening to the world around them and they have their bodies settled, this allows them to really jump into this breakthrough year. Our school never stops or year round. Your teacher knows that child's strengths and weaknesses. We already have a rapport. There's and we understand how your child learns best. In a traditional kindergarten, and I've subbed for Fairfax County's kindergarten, and I'm not saying it was terrible, but I am saying that it was a little bit one size fits all. I was there that day. Everybody made the letter P, whether whether um, whether one child's pencil grip was bad or whether someone could have already been reading. I have kindergartners that are reading on a second and third grade level, but everybody was making the letter P because that's what they were doing that day. Um, and in our school has materials up to a second grade level, so we can meet their needs there, or if they need attention, solidifying their letter sounds, we meet those needs as well. And because of the different age levels, a child who might not be as ahead maybe doesn't feel as behind, or not behind, but maybe doesn't feel that they are behind. because other children are ahead. You don't have that comparison because you have such a dynamic range in the classroom. We follow the child. We meet the individual where they are in academically, socially, emotionally. Our approach is holistic. Um, if we don't have a lesson that we need in that classroom, we either make that lesson or we have the means to purchase it. We go out and facilitate it. If we can think of a way to meet that child's needs, the teacher does her homework and finds a way to help that child. Montessori environments create lifelong learners. They learn not just what to think. They're not they're not just learning by rote, not just regurgitating information. They learn about how to think. They're rewarded for being internally motivated and they develop their own sense of direction and, most importantly, resilience. And then, just to sum up, if you have any doubts that there's a difference in Montessori, I encourage you to spend the morning in a regular kindergarten situation and then spend a morning observing our kindergarten situation, and you make the choice. And um, I'm opening up the floor to questions, and hopefully, if there's not something I can answer, Ms. Kim can answer it.
Can you see
Let's see. No, do you want to come over? Any questions? Anybody? Maybe Stephanie's getting the questions. No one? Yes, yes. Oh, okay, that's maybe I need to scroll down. I don't know how many people are here. Oh, here we go.
Okay.
No. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Anything at all. It doesn't have to be about the third year, just about Montessori in general. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have. I guess you can answer in the chat.
I have a question. So this is Rula Manazara. My son is in the Villa Montessori of Leesburg. Thank you for giving us an overview of all of that. My son, I probably misunderstood this because I didn't realize it's third year. I was thinking of the 3-year-old age group, which my son will be entering. But he is in the primary classroom at this point, and I know that he's exposed to children at a higher age group. And I think, it goes from 3 to 5. So it would be in that third year age group. Can you maybe shed some light on the positive impact that has in exposure?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. Mixed age groups kind of is a little can throw people for a loop at first when they think about it. But honestly, it's such a benefit. In a Montessori classroom that's been up and running, the 3-year-old sees the older children. They sort of get a tour of the classroom of what are the next lessons to look forward to. Do you know what I mean? Like, they'll see a child doing a long bead chain and counting to 1,000. And yeah, the 3-year-old can't count to 1,000, but they can. Sorry, I'm getting reoriented here. But we can show them another math lesson. No, now we're just not getting my head. I think
I'll try.
that's okay. Sorry. The 3-year-old gets a tour of the classroom, like I'm saying. So when they want to do a bead chain to 1,000, we can alternatively pick out. We can't do those beads yet, but we can do the beads that are 1 to 10. Would you like to see those? And usually the answer is yes. So there's something else that we find that they can do. it's also usually those older kids, you know, who usually become those leaders. So they are the ones that are going to, they can even show them those first few basic lessons. And like I said, these younger children are so excited to be working with an older child that sometimes that older child, depending on the dynamic, is more effective than the teacher. Um, does that does that help? Those are a few things. They also, um, there's enough materials in the classroom to meet the younger children's needs as well, because it actually starts at a 2.5-year-old level. So there are several different, ways in which that's beneficial. Also, there's basically one of each material in the classroom. So it's not like everybody is supposed to be doing their own lesson, right? And so it's not like everybody's doing the same thing. So we can meet a multitude of needs that way, if that makes sense. Any Does that help or?
Yeah, it does. I think in our case, like remarkably, my son is going to turn 3 next month, but he already practically knows how to count to 1,000. Like he
That's
can.
fantastic.
But on the flip side, it's like his language development hasn't gotten to the level that I think that he necessarily understands the level that the 5-year-olds are working
Right.
on.
Well,
So,
sometimes,
do you have any tips on that?
well, I do think that being around older children that's another advantage of having those 5-year-olds in there, because the 5-year-olds are more social and more chatty, and they are talking, probably talking a little too much sometimes, but they are talking. And so they're hearing in that setting, he's going to be exposed to more language from the children around them. And they really do absorb language from their classmates. So much faster. I had a child that didn't speak at all at the beginning of the year. He's only spoke Korean midway through the year. All of a sudden, we were going to nap. That's when he decided to share that he had learned to speak. Sorry. We're going to nap when he needs to lie down, and suddenly he starts speaking in complete sentences. And I'm like, okay, this is great, but why now? Like, this is not a good time. I need you to be quiet. But the other thing I could say I would definitely, as parents and even as teachers, sometimes we start, um, a child points to something and we say, "Oh, do you need water? Do you need milk? Do you need this? Do you need that?" Instead of letting the child ask for something, you know, we start fulfilling because we want to take care of them. That's our role. But by fulfilling that need before they actually ask for it, we are not enforcing their language. So by talking to them more, or if they don't ask, like, "Oh, did you want the banana, or did you want, even if you know what it is, or did you want the milk?" And then modeling this as, "I want the milk. I want the milk. I want the milk." So modeling those sentences is a great way of doing that language. And, you know, not give, and if you need to, don't give them the milk until they say the word, because we are too quick to um, to give them to give them to give them things sometimes the time. Too quick to help, and sometimes are hindering.
That's super helpful. Thank you. All right.
Okay,
Sorry to
great.
sway the conversation in a different
No. I
direction,
mean,
but I
I'm glad
appreciate it.
to be able to answer any questions.
Thank
Seriously,
you.
it doesn't have to be about the third year because it's all counts. Anybody else?
Hi, this is Kristen Barkley, also from Villa Montessori, and actually my daughter is a kindergartner in Ruler's son's primary class.
Uh-huh.
And I was curious, she's thriving there, and I was curious, could you say a little more about the transition out of the Montessori kindergarten program into a traditional school for first grade?
I would say if there's one thing that maybe might be a challenge is that and not a challenge, it might be something just to get used to, and this is really the only comment I hear back from parents, is that they're not used to just being in their desk that much because we let them be self-directed. So suddenly being not as self-directed is an adjustment. But honestly, honestly, I think it's the better. I mean, being self-directed is probably a good thing overall. And so sitting in their seat for a longer period of time, especially if that child is super active, that can be a little bit challenging. Hopefully, if their teacher in kindergarten, in their first grade, sorry, excuse me, in their first grade is good, they'll figure out ways to include movement into the classroom, into their learning. But it depends on the teacher, and that is really usually the only concern that I get. And because I know what is required in first grade. Montessori traditionally does all lowercase letters, but I will, sorry, my hand's in the way. I'm gesturing. I can't talk without my hands. Um, because I, because they are not going on here anyway to a Montessori for first grade situation, we're going to teach them the things that they'll need in first grade. Like we traditionally don't teach the capital letters at first, but I will make sure that they do capital letters before they leave in kindergarten, that's something that's addressed, that they know their letter names, not just their letter sounds, because we start with letter sounds so they can jump into early reading, because Z doesn't help you know how to say Z or how to say, A doesn't help you say ah. You know what I mean? So if they have at, they can start sounding out the words. So yeah.
Added.
Yeah.
This is a great question, and we get this a lot in the office on how they transition into a Montessori environment to a traditional school. And not only what Amy has mentioned, but the other component is that since they've been here in a Montessori environment, they learn really how to adapt to the environment that they're going in. So that transition is quite easy for them. They're already used to having more students around them. They're used to having a classroom, having time outside on a playground. So that transition usually is without any kind of, it's very easy for them. The other component that I have gotten in several of our children moving on into the traditional schools is they kind of already know what they're being taught in first grade, because with Montessori, there is no limit of what we can teach them. And with the concepts going up to second grade in our classrooms, we want to keep children learning and have that love for learning. So my best advice is to just make sure that you talk with the teacher and let them know that they're coming from a Montessori environment. It really helps too as well. Mhm.
Any other thoughts?
Hi, this is Manali. My son, he is in Villa Montessori,
Uh-huh.
and I have a question. So he is November born, and I wanted to know if he'll be 4 in November, and if he starts his kindergarten next year, will he be going to kindergarten again in the public school, or will he be transitioned to first grade directly?
I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let you. I'm there. Okay, I'm gonna let you talk to Miss Kim. I'm gonna let Miss Kim feel that.
Okay, so at our school, we are accredited, and which means that we can extend our cutoff date for kindergarten. Which Montessori are you at? Are you in Polaris, Stone Ridge, Leesburg?
Polaris.
Polaris. Okay, so we're in Virginia, so there's some slightly different rules and regulations that they have to follow. So my best advice is to definitely talk with Miss Jessica and see how that works for your school there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a great question, and do follow up with them in the office.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Okay. Well, I thank you. And we're going to have further parent education nights that will go into specific lessons in more detail
Well,
throughout the year.
yeah.
So
So if they have any other questions, please.
that's right. Any other questions, please direct them to your director or, you know, I always can talk about Montessori that I love too much, as Miss Kim's like, okay, Amy, we get it. Yeah, you made your point. All right. So thank you. You all have a good evening. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks.